Okay, so Chris has a library trustees meeting at this time too, so we're gonna jump right to, well, let's do June 10th meeting date first, because that's also a trustees meeting night. So I want to see, let's check our calendar. Is anyone or everyone available on June 12th? It's Roxanne, you have your hand up? Sure, go ahead.
I am not.
Okay.
Hi, Cheryl, I just had a question. Can you explain before you change these dates? So can you, the purposes is June 10th our regular meeting and June 6th is
Right.
with the trust. So can you explain, I guess, what's on the agenda then? What we're anticipating on the agenda?
On the 10th?
Yeah,
the 10th,
because I'm just
the
wondering
10th
because they're so close to each other, you know what I mean?
okay, sure. Well, if you wanted to end up postponing it, we'd be looking at July. Unless we went to the 26th of June. But I guess my thought was we would have a recap maybe from the June 6th meeting. We would have, as we're going to get to in the agenda later, how we're going to go about our report, our 10-year report. So that would be part of the agenda. So but at the moment, Roxanne, that's what I'm thinking it'll be, just kind of a standing report and library. And in September is when the consultant will be starting with the town on the economic development study. So I don't see us having anything to be involved in there until sometime after that, sometime in the fall. So as far as the rest of the summer, I think maybe we'll try and take August off. I think everyone would be happy about that. So I just thought we would keep a June and July date.
Did you say June 6th?
No, it was June 6th. Yes, that's a forum. That's what we discussed at our meeting on May 1st, just
Okay.
to set that date. Because the library keys room gets booked pretty far in advance.
Okay, yeah.
We wanted to set a date so that we could have it before summer kicks in and everyone goes away and it's harder to get people's attention. So that's Chris had advised me that was a date that worked for the library. She offered some alternate dates that I'll be traveling for. So we kept it there. Roxanne, sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So for the forum that's scheduled on the 6th, who is attending that forum?
That's a
So
public
is it a
forum.
closed forum or is it an open, or can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's a public forum to give basically the presentation that Chris, Will, and I gave to the select board, and then to solicit public feedback.
Okay.
We can talk about whether there's additional information we want to add to that tonight. We have some new information or some additional information that Chris sent and I forwarded. And then it's really to start to get some public process started on it before summer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I just would like to get a date to hold, and we may or may not have it. So we could look at June 12th or June 26th. Does anybody, I'm sorry, I think Tabor, you said you were not available on the 12th, right?
I could make myself available at all. I could cut out early from another event. The 6th I'm definitely booked for. The 12th I could make myself. The 26th, as long as it's Zoom, I can do it.
Okay, I think as far as the 6th is concerned, excuse me, it's mostly to make the presentation, get the feedback. So we're not going to have deliberations ourselves. So Chris, do you know if that's can be recorded so that, like, if Tabor would like to watch that later, he'd be able to?
Yes, we're pursuing that. So
Okay.
I didn't get to Will that, but he was going to try to get it recorded for us.
Okay.
Yeah. at the time, because I think we were talking 6:30 or 7, so I haven't confirmed the actual time with him yet either, so.
Okay, all right.
Is the intention to move it from the 10th to the 12th just because the 10th is closer to the 6th?
The 10th is when the library trustees meet, so I was just trying to, that's where we had it. As, you know, sort of a regular scheduled meeting. The 6th, this public forum that was added. So it's really, we're not going to have a discussion of anything on like an agenda on the 6th. It'll be just, we're there to participate, you know, as with the library trustees. So it could be as few as me as the chair or as many of us, you know, we would post it. So as many of us that wanted to attend could attend. And I would think the trustees would do the same, Chris.
Yep.
That make sense? Okay. So, with that, it might help inform next steps, what we hear at that forum. So, but whether it's the 12th or the 26th, you know, 2 weeks is not going to make or break it. So it just, if we want to get the most, our availability, just when it's not a library trustee night. All right, so anybody want to make a suggestion what's best, the 12th or the 26th?
I'd prefer the 26th, but that's just a
Okay,
tiny little preference. There's
Yeah, same here.
marginal.
all right. Chris, do you think that would work for you and for
Yeah.
Will or whomever
I
else?
think either of those dates work for me.
Okay,
If for some reason I can't make it, I'll make sure that somebody else is there, so.
okay. And we're going to have a new staff person. This person is starting on the 20th of May. And I believe we'll be staffing our committee again. So haven't yet met her, but Tim announced it at our planning board meeting last week. So hopefully that will be the first meeting that we'll have her. All right. So going to discuss now the town center library parking discussion, the next step. So Chris followed up our meeting that was not May 1st, but the prior one where we talked about having a bit more information. So, you know, we knew that 50 or 60 parking spaces was the number that the library was seeking, but we were trying to tie that to what does that specifically mean? Like if you had something less than 50 or 60, you know, what do you get or not get with that? So, and then she was also asked to reach out, or they were asked to reach out to the churches. And so they've done that. So you saw the email, but Chris, did you want to go over that and then see if folks have questions?
I don't need to read through it if everyone, I know it didn't get out till late today. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but I guess I'll just try to summarize it. I mean, it's really hard to say how many programs per space, you know, and to lower that. I mean, it's not an easy answer. So most of the math in here is from Will related to that particular one, but you know, basically we need 25 spaces in order to add another program. So that would specifically, like the children's programs, we have 2 morning programs that follow each other. We have to have space to allow for people that are at the program to leave before more people can come. So we would need at least an additional 25 in order to be able to add 1 more program. If we had the 50 to 60, what that would allow us to do is to offer like 2 9 o'clock programs and maybe 2 10:30 programs or something. And we have the people that are interested in coming, but because of the parking, we're limited. And then we'll try to go in a little bit more about the non-children's programmings. But again, if we have enough parking, we can have people using, you know, the upstairs and the downstairs at the same time and overlapping. It just allows us that number. So, and then I spoke to both of the churches. I'm not sure, at least the current ministers, either of them had formally been asked about parking before. So I asked them both to kind of formally respond, and they both, you know, confirmed what I put here as what they had said. So they're both willing to offer some parking to the library, but it can't be on a regular basis. So we can't like start a program every Monday night and use their spaces because, you know, they have funerals, they have other things of their own. But we could, if we wanted to use their space, we would have to, you know, get the date out ahead of time and ask them if that date was a date that's still open and that we could use. So it seems like it's probably something that, again, we could use in the interim until we find more full parking. The morning programs can't be expanded at all with the parking that they offer because the First Con doesn't have any availability at all during the day. It's in their contract that their nursery school uses the parking from 7:30 until 5:30 at night every day. So the other church we could do some possible morning program, but again, not necessarily on a regular basis. And so I guess that's all really I have to comment on. You know, I just wanted to see if you had any questions or if there was something else. I'm also following up with the hospital. So I've talked to Tony Picello and he and I will be catching back up again because they are doing some parking lot additions, I believe. He couldn't give me all the specifics of when and where. They're still in the planning, but he and I will have some more conversations, and definitely before that June 6th, I hope to be able to at least say something. Again, I think it might be a possibility that we could use some spaces in the evening. During the day, they're trying to get their employees that are currently being bused from the church down the street. I don't know if it's 100 or 200, I forget what the number was, but they have buses that bring their employees to the hospital right now. So during the day, most of those spaces would be taken up by their employees. So there might be some nighttime usage that we could look at. But that's really speculating on my part right now. So.
Okay, Elaine?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the information. It was really helpful to see some numbers and the impact. And I also just wanted to make a comment on kind of what I was thinking as I read it. Just thinking, you know, it's certainly nice of them to offer the parking, and it's, you know, seems like a Band-Aid approach, but I just thinking through logistically, it sounds a little bit like a nightmare when you think about it's just inconsistent availability. Some of it's on request, which sounds like when you think about educating patrons and about when the overflow parking is accessible, it seems a bit daunting. If it was consistent, if it was every Monday and every Wednesday or something like that, then I think it would be slightly easier. But considering it's not really consistent and you have to pre-request it, it sounds like it'd be very difficult to educate patrons. And then also patrons that, you know, start using it might expect continued access in the future, even when the library hasn't coordinated availability. And I think that that's going to lead to a lot of confusion and frustration. You know, the only thing I could think of is like in the interim using some sort of, and I'm sure the library's already thought through all these logistics, but like big A-frame sign, like overflow parking available today, but I still think it's just not a good long-term solution. Thanks.
And Dick?
Yeah, I haven't read into the information. I apologize. I just didn't get to it prior to this meeting. So my questions are going to be very, very open-ended here. But Chris, I got a couple of questions for you. What are there peak times that the library needs spaces?
So the mornings specifically for morning programs. So that would be like 9 to 12 mostly.
Right.
And then you know, afternoons, like 3 to 4 is when we experience a lot of traffic from parents picking up their kids after the after school program. Tutors and things like that come into the library to use the library for that. And then evening programs. So there's many different groups that meet at the library, and we're limited to how many groups. We have the building space to offer more group meetings, but we don't have the parking space to offer more group meetings.
Okay.
So those are.
Yep, that's a good answer. You mentioned that you needed an additional, I guess, 25 spots for a new program. What do you actually need today? Forget adding the new program. If we said we weren't going to add any new programs, how many spaces do you need
I think what we're saying is we need 20 to 25 additional spaces to add a new add another children's program. We would have to be able to have at least that to be able to offer it when the other parking wasn't taken up.
Right, but if you didn't add a program, how many spaces do you need today?
How many do we use today? Or
Well, I mean, how many do you need? Do you need any spaces today, or do we need the additional parking because we're adding new programs?
we're looking to expand our programs. So we can't offer more programs without more parking.
Right, I understand that. I'm just trying to get to what today, without adding a program, do you have sufficient parking?
Yes, with the sufficient number of programs that we have.
So right now, the status quo, we have enough spots. So we're talking about, as we add programs, we're adding spots. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So Chris,
what?
just may I chime in there 1 sec, please? I thought I recalled Will saying that you have to turn away some uses, Chris, because you don't have adequate parking. And I think that had to do with the meeting rooms. Is that right?
Right. That's the evening. So
Okay.
evenings, like I said, we can only book like, those aren't programs. Those are just meeting use rooms, which the
Right,
town
okay.
has a big need for meeting use rooms, but we can't offer more than what we have parking for. So
Okay.
I don't know if.
But that's not a library need, that's a town need. Is that correct?
It's a town need, right?
Right,
Yeah.
okay,
I mean,
all right. I'm trying to separate what you need from what the town needs and try to put these numbers together so we have some idea what we have. One other question, I guess, we don't have any idea currently as to what spaces may be available on town property across the street, do we?
We do. I have a slide that I can pull up if we'd like to see it.
Well, we'll have to know that, I think, because I'm trying to try to figure out how many spaces we actually are dealing with on the library property itself. And then,
Library has 58.
right, 58. And then they're asking for an additional 25 so they can add a new program, correct?
They were asking for 50 to 60.
Program limited all this time, yes.
What's that?
They've been parking limited in terms of what they want to offer all this time.
Right, but I asked earlier, how many spaces do you need currently? And they seem to have sufficient parking today, except for the overflow for the night meetings. And we're talking about adding 25 spaces for a new program.
So maybe what we need to,
25 for an additional program.
maybe to clarify, Chris, does the library have to turn people away from the morning programs? Like, is there a sign up where it's a cutoff and then people are turned away because you've reached the limit? Do you know?
We used to have to fix registration. I don't know if they still use that, but yeah, we definitely turn people away. I mean, there's not enough current room for all of the children's programmings that we would like to offer today, right now, as it is. And I don't, I just want to comment on your previous comment, because the library is looked at as a community building. It was supported and upgraded for community spaces and use. So I don't consider just library programs as our need. I think, servicing the community and allowing them to use the space for, we have that room downstairs. It's got the most technology of any space in the town, and the only one that offers that kind of, that kind of availability. So I do think.
I'm not questioning that. I mean, all I was trying to do was trying to figure out, are there peak times to see if we could dovetail with potential openings with the churches and the town. And I'm really trying to, I mean, this is gonna be a question that's gonna come up later on as to how many spaces do you actually need? And that's what I think what I'm trying to get to. And I apologize for not being able to take a look at your information prior to this.
Okay. I mean, I think the needs have been outlined and in the previous document, and I apologize, I don't have it with me, but I know you've all been provided that kind of the library facts, so we can see the current
I'm gonna
requirements
call it up.
and what we're looking for, which was, the 40 to 60 parking spots.
Certainly
So-
understand. I was just trying to get at as
Yep.
to, it's not for what we need currently, the library needs today. We may need those additional spaces for civic meetings in the evenings, right? But if we're going to add programs as the library wants to do, we're going to have additional parking spots.
Right.
Is that accurate so far?
Yes.
So
Yep.
Chris, just wanted to help, maybe this would help. This is for a slide deck that you and Will, or I think Will probably initially drafted for the presentation with the select board.
Yep.
So some of your questions, Dick, might be
Right.
here.
So
Um,
it says here the library needs 40 additional spaces to service current patrons of the programs, so we're not talking about new parking spots for new programs. We just need 40 more to just do what we're doing today. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, that was a little confusing to me. Okay. And I guess the only other thing, and I'll let someone else come in on this, is because I think we do need to know how many town spaces would be available, is that I think, because you would know this, I think the library right now shuttles their employees back and forth to St. Elizabeth's Church. I think they have some sort of an arrangement with them where they have a shuttle bus that basically picks their employees up, and you park your car down at St. Elizabeth's, and then they pick the people up and drop them back off. I mean, I don't know how many employees you have. Is it possible in the short term to piggyback onto the hospitals program with the employees parking there, and the bus just comes by, picks them up, and drops them down at St. Elizabeth's?
We talked about that with the hospital staff a year ago, and
Uh-huh.
no, it isn't. So the times are different from our employees and when their employees work.
Okay.
So no, and also it didn't seem like there was more spots at St. Elizabeth's that the church or whoever they've coordinated this with was willing to offer to the library.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay, thank you.
You know, they fully use the parking and they're looking to try to get it back. So,
Okay. All right, thank you.
So
And-
Dick, just quickly, I'll just leave this up for a second before I drop this share. This is the parking spaces that we had from one of our prior slide decks around town hall. And Chris provided us, I think, in the email, the number of parking spaces associated with the churches, which is not included on the screen here.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll drop this share for now. Okay, I think Roxanne had her hand up next.
Let me take my hand down.
Thank you. I'm just wondering a couple of questions. So with regards to the parking around town hall, I still need to follow up on that because the fire station is still getting completed. And I think we need a more accurate count on what's going on over there, to really get a firm number on this. So I wanted to try to follow up on that. I'm going to follow up on that. I just haven't had a chance, but I would like to follow up on that.
So Roxanne,
And
sorry.
I'm sorry, and I could do that. And also, I had talked about, right, as you're exiting town hall, you may be able to get a handful of spots there where people are parking illegally. And I just want to check in with Chase Berkeley from DPW about this, and I meant to do that before the meeting, so I do apologize. I didn't do that.
I thought we heard an answer about that. I don't remember exactly from whom, but someone said that there's not a lot of clearance around the fire truck to have those be official spots if the fire truck was coming out. I want to say it was
I think
Josh.
that was as is.
But as is, but I mean, here's the thing is, I will tell you, I was there not too long ago. I was actually getting out of my car as the fire truck was pulling out. There seemed to be enough room, but I think you certainly could use more, and I don't know legally what the amount is. So I did want to check in with him about that. I think we have to look at all options of what we can do, because if we're hearing that parking is not, needed, I think we have an obligation to do that. And I also feel that if we're putting a crosswalk across Canton Ave in that vicinity, then the parking on the town hall side would be great. I will also say the fire station, the new fire station, does have some meeting rooms in the main lobby area, the main area of it, that may be used for community as well. So I think there are a lot of like balls juggling that are in the air right now. I think we need a little bit more time to sort of sort out what the real numbers are, and see if there's a way that we can, with existing, help a little bit as well. So what we have. So I do want to
Roxanne,
follow up on that. Thank you.
yeah, it would be great if you could get the information by the June meeting, because, this is something we've talked about a few times, and these are circled here. In my experience with this kind of striping on the, that means don't park there. And it's because of the safety reasons that's usually striped that way. So I think we just need clarity. We've brought this up a few times. Josh Lee looked into it before, and I think we just need to get closure on it. And then
I'll follow up on that, Cheryl.
yeah.
I'm happy to do that. I
Great.
just didn't have a chance, and I apologize.
Yeah,
I didn't get
no
it for
problem.
today. So I will follow up on that.
And
Yeah,
then the
I
other,
think-
sorry,
Oh,
Regina,
sorry,
just two
Cheryl.
more things and then I'll come right back to you. On the meeting rooms, I'd really like to understand what the capacity of those spaces are. Because we need to look at, when you're looking at parking, you need to look at if those are nighttime use, daytime use, how does that get accommodated in the parking that already exists? So we're adding another use to the town hall area that doesn't exist currently, so that will add more need for parking. And then I also sent an email today to Tim with a copy to Nick asking for the employee count at town hall, because again, that would drive what some of the parking needs at town hall is. And so, I understand construction is going to be complete this summer, which would be good timing if that's true. It looks to me like that's pretty aggressive to think it's going to be done in a month or two, looking at it when I drove by the other day. But hopefully we can get the answers to the utilization after it's done. But these new uses is not going to be something that's factored in yet. Okay, Regina, go ahead, please.
Thank you. No, I think, Roxanne, you bring up these great points about existing parking and kind of chipping away at some of the needs. And I thought at our last meeting that we came to the idea that if the library needs 25 spots or whatever the large amount is, that there are not 25 spots available at town hall at this point. And so that we still have a pressing need, and that we should be able to both chip away by asking these questions and finding out more information, and start planning for actually creating the new parking that is a necessity. And so I just want to keep our eye on the ball that, we've been talking about this for a while, and that the need is greater than anything that we can find at town hall right now. And then the second thing is that I believe it was at town meeting, someone brought up the fact that the Wildcat Den is looking for a more permanent home, and may be in negotiations to use the second floor conference room of the fire station as its new home. I'm not positive exactly when that was pointed out. But it's definitely something that we need to make sure that we are, engaging with as we think about the alternative uses for this structure that we're thinking about to solve the needs of the library's parking situation. Thank you.
Okay, Roxanne?
Thank you. And thank you, Regina. I think I'm just trying to think outside the box a little bit for, no, I don't know that this would solve the 25 spots, but maybe it solves 10, maybe it solves 15, maybe it's 10. And, maybe we go back to the church and say, can you give us 4 or 5? I'm just thinking outside the box because we know what the cost is for some of this stuff. The other,
100%.
yeah, no, and the other thing I was going to say, the second floor of that fire station, I don't know that it's handicapped accessible for the build out on that old building. I think that's part of it, that we, everything has to be handicapped accessible as well. So
For what?
on
The
the fire
Wildcat Den.
station, for a Wildcat Den. So the old building that that we're sort of, it sort of gutted out, and we're, we decided that we'd put some of the basic things in there. We don't have an elevator to get to that second floor either. So that's a handicapped accessible issue. So I think we would need some money for that too. Thank you.
Okay, Elaine, then Tabor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, there's a car alarm going off in the background. No, I just wanted to add that I think it's commendable that everyone's exploring creative solutions for parking. I think through my opinion, through months of these discussions, that it's evident that the library has an inability to meet its current needs as well as offer sought after programming due to their resource constraints. And I think that hinders their ability to meet the community's needs. I think some of these scattered offerings are certainly helpful, but they aren't enough to fully serve the demands. And to Cheryl's point, there are new uses. And I think, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this, Cheryl, but just the fire station's plan to hold trainings for out-of-town fire personnel is something else that I believe was mentioned previous. So I think parking is going to continue to be a need and an even greater need as we move forward. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Making a note of that. Okay, Tabor.
So I think that I'd like to use Elaine's description of this is no matter what we do here in the short run, it's a Band-Aid. And in the long run, the library has a serious parking deficit, and crossing the street is not ideal. And I know that Christine, you had discussed this with some employees, or at least with Will, that this is something that, you know, is number of the customers are going to rebel on, and that they may show up once or twice, but it will deter people from showing up by crossing the street. So I'm still think, you know, even if we do find some temporary space, and as Roxanne points out, you know, two spaces at one church and 3 spaces at the other church, and then 15 from the town hall, we're still cobbling together stuff that's makeshift. And you know, at some point we're going to have to determine whether or not the library can afford to build new parking. And I'm saying the library because it's the library programs, and that's kind of the piece, whether it's built on that other site or even, you know, garaged over the existing parking lot, you know, a deck. But those are real costs, and I think the town who will be reviewing a lot of these financials, we just finished with town meeting, and it, you know, it's so difficult to make any kind of headway at town meeting for any financial decisions unless you've got all of your numbers in a row, and everything has to add up forward and backward, and you have to have examined everything, or the town meeting members and or others will get up and object for reasons that don't make any sense at all, but half the room's going to be with them if it hasn't been fully explained. So I think, you know, you're going to have to figure out this, you know, deck with maybe some housing or offices over it, cafe. We're going to have to figure out what it's going to be to put a deck over the existing parking lot. And I think we need something more than just, you know, ballpark 80 grand of space. It's got to be something somewhat serious in order to get support. And then go back to, we're already doing all these other things, and that's the, you know, that's maxed out. Christine, with this, is there any appetite for moving a program, for instance, to the room over the library, over the fire station, or something like that? I know these programs are difficult to get, you know, to establish and change, so that if you were to do it for the whole fall or the whole spring with a lot of parents coming in with kids, you'd have to have a very consistent schedule. But I'm thinking, if we can't get the parking, can we move the room? And I don't know if that's something that anybody's looked at.
I don't know if it is, and I don't really feel I'm the right person to answer that. I'd like to bring that to Will. You know, I just off the cuff, I'll say staffing is the biggest issue, because the library was built so we could share staff for many purposes. So
Right.
If you're saying maybe one children's librarian could go over somewhere else and do their program elsewhere, you know, if it's just a music program and all they need is their guitar, you know, maybe that's an option. So I will ask, you know, Will about that if he's thought about it. So
I do think we need to address all of those questions, because heck, if I'm thinking of it, or if anybody else here is thinking of it, then, somebody at town meeting is gonna think of it. And we want to make sure that it's addressed ahead of time, that these are the answers we came up with, and we've examined everything, so these are the obvious choices, and get most everybody on board with it.
Well, as far as
Okay.
the number of parking spaces at Town Hall, and if that issue comes up at the forum, Chris, I can put a slide together that kind of takes some various slides that we have here, puts them into one. That would help answer that question if it comes up during the forum. Regina, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I also want to second what you just said, Cheryl, and that is accounting for all of the possible parking spaces. That even if we said, here's the number of employees at town hall that regularly park there, and that here's the number of spaces that we've seen that are open during these programming times, just to get that ballpark that Roxanne was looking for all on one slide. Now I will say, Tabor, you just brought up a really great point that I hadn't quite considered. Through the eyes of town meeting, the robustness of the community input process is going to be like absolutely important. So we need to track the number of constituents that we've engaged with at these meetings.
Mhm.
And the number of whether it's mailings or public announcements or however we're putting this out, so that we have that itemized as well. Because we all know that people are going to want to know, like, who made these decisions, what data they were based on, and what community input they were based on, right? And I think it's important to have those answers for them. So I just think we just need to make sure that we're following that process. And Chris, I don't know what the library is doing on that side in terms of how you get the word out for your meetings. But that would be a wonderful thing for us to help with too, is there a way for us to open up and even broaden that net?
If I can just answer a little bit that question, Regina, Will has been in touch with Nick, and we'll put the the public forum will be blasted on the town through his distribution list that goes out, and then also on their website. It'll also be on our website. We will be sharing it with all the current programs. So all the parents that come to these children's programs, we will encourage them to come to this meeting and provide feedback and input, as well as all the other, groups that regularly meet. So contacting all those current groups would also be something we'd look at, so.
If we, I think now I've kind of come to some sense of summary on this part of the discussion. I wanted to show you all, let me see, stop this share and do a different one, sorry. Starting to look at, thinking about what our next steps might be. We received this drawing just before Josh left. It's kind of this aerial from, and it came from Chase, and it shows the location of the crosswalk, in this aerial photo. And I looked at this relative to the diagrams we had done for the new parking location. And I believe there's a little conflict there. And you can kind of see it here. The yellow is, I'm approximating where the crosswalk is based on that prior slide. And then these rectangles are approximately where we were looking at the parking. So having this crosswalk and then a driveway right next to it like that is probably presents a safety challenge. So I think we would need to look at moving this towards this direction, right, towards the left. So one of the things I was thinking is that the survey doesn't across the street. It just stops at Canton Ave, so let me go back to that. See if we have that slide in here. Well, this will give a good idea, right? It's just Canton Ave, so we didn't have a good sense of what's happening across the street. So I was thinking one of the things that we could proceed with is ask for a proposal to add on the survey to include the house next door and these driveways and a little bit more information across the street, so that as we think about this a little further, we can bear all of that in mind. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about that?
And
Um,
just to recap, Cheryl, there's no red light here. This is literally just, crosswalk with all the bells and whistles, right?
Yeah, I understand. I mean,
Oh, no, I'm just, in my head, I'm processing. If we had a driveway there with a curb cut, is there cause for a red light potentially being put there, or not really with just a drive?
this is one of those things we had asked, I think, Beta for some more guidance, or maybe it was Chase Berkeley. But I think this is where we go back to Beta and we say, we asked you if there were any safety concerns along here. And you told us, that you really didn't have any, but we do now, in looking at this, want to make sure that that if we do cite a driveway here, how far away would it make sense to be from the crosswalk? Now, obviously, this is a driveway right here, right? So you
Right.
can see these little rectangle right there where I'm kind of pointing, and this one here. This is where they kind of slope down, right, to get to for handicapped access. So you certainly, they need that kind of room onto the side. So I would think you can barely see here where it is, but I would think that you'd be looking at maybe here. So it's a slight adjustment in terms of where it would go. And then it would be useful to know, how it impacts the curbside parking spaces on Canton Avenue. So I just think a base survey that includes a little more information would be beneficial. And then I can ask if they have, I mean, this is from Beta, a pretty, looks to me pretty good resolution kind of aerial. And if they can expand this aerial to include the whole of town center, then we could probably get these parking counts in something that's a little bit more legible, so I think that's another thing that we could follow up with in the short term. Do folks have any thoughts about that? Do you agree with that? Should I follow up with Tim and ask for a proposal for that work?
I agree with it.
Okay, so I say
I
yes.
I think if we're gonna do any of that investigation, we probably need to include that parking garage area that you wanted to put on it. And the same thing for if you were to put a deck over the existing parking lot at the library. Just the basic engineering, how would it fit? Would you get any more spaces, et cetera? I mean, doing all the calcs, because those are gonna be required.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have an engineering study of how to do it at the existing library, one thing is it's flat. And so if you have to ramp up to another level, and so you would lose the space underneath the ramp to get up to that second level.
Or
So
you excavate and put it down below, half to below and half up.
you still have to have a ramp. So, your efficiency on it, I mean, I think it's, it would take an engineer to evaluate that. So if you want to seek a proposal from an engineer to evaluate that, is that what you're looking for, Tabor?
I just think if we don't answer the question, it's gonna be asked and hung out there, and people are gonna say you didn't do your homework.
Okay.
How much is that, would a study like that cost, Cheryl?
Not certain. I can ask around a bit. My office, we've worked on parking structures, and we work with a a firm that's all they do is parking analysis and parking structures. So I was thinking I could place a phone call to the engineer that I work with there and see what
We're
he,
doing one parking facility analysis. Seems like we could do a second one. Not that it would be a whole lot cheaper, but it would just be,
it's just more complex at the library. So it takes an engineering kind of analysis.
What's that
Because it's
company?
already there. I'm sorry,
Cheryl,
Elaine?
curious what the company uses. Do you know if the?
Oh,
company-
Desmond,
Okay.
do you know them? I've worked with Walker also, but I'm working with Desmond right now. I've done a couple garages with them. And they do this kind of early analysis. We may be doing one together in another community soon. So this kind of very early analysis. But all right, so I can find out what that would take. Do we have then agreement that we should seek a proposal for a little bit of an expanded survey? That and include a larger aerial view of the town center so we can get a better sense of parking there.
Cheryl, who are we surveying?
I'm thinking of a land survey, Dick, so going back to the underlying drawing here to include more information in the base survey, because, you know, like here, the crosswalk is probably like right here. And so it's kind of, we would want that on the survey, where the proposed crosswalk is, where the
Yeah.
drives come out across the street, where the
Right.
driveway next door is. It's just existing information from the surveyor, because, you know, just I've tried to pull various documents together. We have all these different resources. Nothing is to scale except for bits and pieces. So it's good to have something to scale when you're really starting to see if something might work.
And this is something that we should be doing, not the planning department, right?
Well, we had the survey done, you know, when I
I know
say
that.
we, MPIC and the library. Yeah, the contract goes through the planning department, but the town doesn't survey anything themselves. It's always contracted out. It was Bowler in this case, Beta or Bowler, Bowler did the engineering here, Beta. I think Bowler did it.
Right.
Beta,
But the contract would be with the planning department, but we'd pay for it, is that correct?
well, yeah, that would be the idea. We need to obviously see how much it would cost. Just like we shared the cost of this with the library trustees.
I understand that. I'm just trying to we got a lot of moving pieces here, and I just want to make sure we all understand what our roles are going forward.
Yeah, this is really just part of collecting the due diligence is the way I look at this piece of it.
Okay.
Let's see, any other hands, any other questions? All right, so Elaine, go ahead. Sure.
No, I was just gonna say, I agree. I think there's a lot of access points in that we need to be considerate of the crosswalk. So
Yeah.
it's good to get. Yeah.
Yeah, because we understand this is moving forward, so it will become a bit of the existing condition again. And all right, so we have Roxanne's going to follow up about around town hall, and the new, do you think, Roxanne, that you could follow up on with the fire department as well, and how many outside trainings they plan to have, what time of day they would be, how many people would be coming for those?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, great. So if you can do that, I'll follow up on the proposal just to get the numbers. And I'll prepare a slide which summarizes what we have for existing around town hall. And I'm just going to run through these slides real quick just for you to see. This is what the slide deck was for the select board meeting. And I understand, Chris, this is what you wanted to use as well for the forum, right? So these haven't been updated or changed other than those last few that I shared that weren't really part of the public presentation. So we have what the stats that Will had prepared for the current programming, and then the why expand, what they're looking to do. I circulated this before, I think before our April meeting, so you should have it, but I can
Yep.
recirculate it.
Mhm.
Library goals. What has been looked at by the library before coming to us. What we've looked at in terms of utilization, which Josh pretty much assisted us with. And then what we've looked at together, how we had the wetlands flagged and we had a survey done so that the wetlands could be located on it, and how we looked at the Reedsdale Road. Actually, this slide says there's 58 spaces around Town Hall, including the fire station. So there's 13 dedicated to the fire station. There's the 24 curbside spaces, and then the location for the, potentially for the new. The plan that we had indicated, we showed the select board that we had priced just parking and also parking with other uses, getting to what Tabor was saying and what we've all talked about, whether there's potential to help with the cost of this by adding another use to it and not just have parking. And we showed what those costs were. And that was it for the presentation. And we said next steps. So do you have any suggestions or thoughts for the forum different from what I just ran through? Basically it's what has been done. Sort of an overview of what's been done to date.
Quick question, if I have a, if I have the bandwidth and time at being a teacher at the end of May, if I can hit some of this data up in Canva and make it easier for people to process at the drop of a hat, would anyone, if I take a stab at that?
Chris, with the library slides?
No, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I wouldn't change your slides at all. I would just start thinking about it from a
Like some of these, you think, the words? Okay, sure. And then, I'm sure Will and Chris would need to take a look at it. So if you've got time to do that, Regina,
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
And if you have suggestions on the other slides that, I'll add a slide, like I said, which summarizes those. Here it just says 58, but if we want to have another slide that just amplifies where those are and how they relate.
Yeah,
You
I
can see
think
the distance to the
some
library.
of those where it says like 80 to 90% capacity, just having a little pie chart
Yeah,
and stuff like that. I think that
okay,
can be easier to read.
all right.
I would
Bolding some of it.
try and put a date on that. Let me just look at my calendar, okay?
Sure. And while you're doing that, Roxanne, you have your hand raised?
Just a quick thing, would you be able to just resend that around? I know I
Sure.
got it at some point, but if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
And I think
I'm gonna,
Cheryl will probably add a few more.
okay, this would be a good starting point.
Here. I mean, we talked about, the hospital, we talked about the
Oh,
church.
right. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, so
we'll
we'll add a slide for that, right?
slide. So, I need to just capture all the notes that we just talked about. And so
Right.
we will update this presentation. I don't think I'm looking to present it as it is currently, so.
Right, okay.
And the town status of that, based on what Roxanne gets back from information from that and the fire station, but.
Yeah,
you
it would be
Town
helpful,
Okay.
Roxanne, if you had any information before the 6th that we could include in that kind of update on the demand.
Sure, I'll work on that.
Sure, thanks. And then I wasn't necessarily thinking that this was for the forum, but this might be just some of my thinking about what next steps after June might be. I was interested to get feedback if people wanted to say, okay, we should focus just on parking, or if there was an opportunity to have parking co-located with another use. Whether that, so that what we're looking at is a structure and not a parking lot when we go down Canton Avenue. We could ask then also if if people thought that it would be a benefit to have different uses just as a benefit, and then also whether having a financial benefit if there was another use. And one of the things that was of interest to me recently is DCR has a request for expressions of interest on their property on, I think it's Brush Hill Road there. It's basically,
Number 7 Brush Hill Road.
number 7, right? And I saw that. I went to see that property last Friday. And, you know, that's just really a simple request for expressions of interest. It's not, excuse me, detailed in any way. So I was thinking maybe we could issue as a town a request for expressions of interest to see if any of this would make sense to a development community. And it wouldn't be asking for an RFP or anything, but we would get an idea of whether somebody thought there was an opportunity here. So just something to plant an idea for you to think about with that.
And there's also some grassroots organizing going on around soliciting community feedback to put together a small plan for that too.
For the
that-
DCR one, right?
Yeah, several town meeting members have been soliciting community engagement and feedback in an effort to do that.
Which is great. But I think that, you know, the DCR person, when I went on that tour, said that that's what they start with, you know, to see what the interest in the either stewardship community or development community might be interested when they put these properties into that curatorship, historic curatorship program. So it's, again, sort of a thought to see what the marketplace might be, their thoughts might be. They might say, no, it's not big enough, it's not worth it. We wouldn't be able to make it work. In which case we'd say, you know, maybe we've taken that part of it as far as we can. And it would have to just be a, you know, a public parking use, right? So, any other thoughts about this topic now before we move on in the agenda?
I wonder if it makes sense for us to make a decision on what we think is a recommendation for next steps in this regard, rather than just kind of opening it up.
Okay, well, Elaine, do you want to give me your thoughts or give us all your thoughts then?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should move forward with what you just explained, and try to see kind of start to gauge interest in what the market might do. Personally, I would prefer not just to just see a parking lot, but that's, you know, going to be dependent on a lot of different factors. So I think, you know, moving forward with, how did you describe it, Cheryl?
Seeing what the well, there's two things. There's one, like what the market might look at, but then also what the public might be interested in. You know, so we could use the forum if the library was interested in this as well, to solicit some feedback about, you know, do you think there's opportunity? Would you be interested in opportunity, you know, for, let's say, a cafe at this location? Do you think that's a good idea? You know, do you think co-locating other uses here makes sense if it would help offset some of the costs? Do you think it should be purely a municipal use and not complicated? You know, just kind of get some public feedback. But that could be done through a survey. You know, we're doing a survey. The planning board approved a survey last week that's going to go back out about MBTA community zoning. And so it doesn't require people to be at a meeting, you know, to kind of provide their feedback. It will be, you know, an online survey, but also there'll be paper copies available at the library and at the Council on Aging, and I think at Town Hall. So we could use that kind of survey approach, you know, and that could be something that would have to follow. You'd have to talk about this a little bit further, I think, to put those survey questions together. Maybe ask Tim about those.
Yeah.
And then
Go ahead.
we'd want to, once we start talking about other uses here besides the parking for the library, want to get engaged with the planning board and bring them up to speed on it. So I guess what we could do is if we think that these are good next steps, what we should do is Meredith will have me come in and give an update to the planning board. We'll have the forum, and then we can talk about these further at our June meeting, I think is what I would suggest. So we have time to think about it, get that feedback.
Yeah.
Well, Cheryl, I got a concern right now. I think that,
And
I mean, I'm very
Elaine
much,
was,
I'm sorry, Elaine.
sorry, Elaine, were you finished?
No, but I just wanted to respond to what you said real quick. Sorry, Dick, I'll be
No,
fast.
no, take as much time as you want, Elaine. I'm sorry.
No, no apology needed. I was just gonna say I like that approach, Cheryl. I like putting forth a recommendation of next steps and outlining something, for instance, of, like you said, getting in front of the planning board, doing community outreach. And my personal opinion is a survey would probably yield more results and than having whoever shows up to the meeting. Because sometimes I think what happens is you get, maybe it's people who happen to be against a parking garage and they get really motivated to attend the meeting, and that's kind of the only voices you hear in the room. And so to be able to have something that maybe hits a broader audience, that's my personal opinion on it. Not sure how the rest of the committee feels, but I think that just in response to kind of your suggestions is that it might be nice to put together, here's our recommended next steps. Because we've really put a lot of time collectively as a committee on this, and I think it'd be nice to do that. So thanks.
Thank you. Dick.
Cheryl, I got a little concerned. I think one of the overriding issues that I'm looking at right now, and I'm trying to be a little bit uber focused on one thing at a time, is that taking a look at the need for parking for the library. And I get concerned when we start to mix metaphors a little bit, trying to interject other uses in terms of what this project is all about. I think, having the meeting with the library trustees, having the public have the ability to weigh in and talk about, to see if there is a need, how much of a need is there, how do we handle that, how much parking do they need, how much parking can we afford, I think is to me is issue number one. The rest of it I get it. It sort of fits into other pieces, but I really just like to have this committee focus initially on parking for the library right now. These people have been dealing with this issue, I think if my notes are correct, since 2015. We're 9 years later, but I think they deserve this thing to stand on its own. And then we can move forward with some of these other initiatives. I know that they're important. I'm not a big fan of a cafe. I think it generates more traffic and parking issues. Bringing in a private developer, regardless of what's going to be built there, causes other issues and will just slow this process down. I think if we let's deal with the parking first. Then after we deal with the parking issues, then we can deal with some of these other issues as we go forward.
All right, I'd like to see everyone's feedback here. So how about, Elaine, you have your hand up. You want to respond to that?
Yeah, because I feel like we just talked about this at a recent meeting, and I totally understand what Dick's saying. Like, if we could just address the parking, and that would be an easy solve, or something simple, and we're dealing with one problem and then move on, because it feels like now it's become a kind of a larger project that initially we thought about. But like when I take a step back and think about it, it's like what we're really discussing here is taking very valuable town-owned land that's a premium, right? And so when we put together a recommendation, or we think about we're going to put a parking lot on this, which we have so little of this town-owned land, I do think it makes sense to think about other uses, possibility of uses, and let the community decide on what we want as a community. And I don't think it hurts to make a recommendation or to put thought behind having different types of uses than solely parking. Again, that's just my opinion, but I do think we did discuss this recently. I know it's an issue. I know you've brought the same concern up before, Dick, and I totally can understand. I just wanted to share my thoughts on it.
Thank you.
Okay, how about Regina? You have your hand raised.
Yeah, that's where I was headed, which was, I think you know, Dick, I took to heart and really heard what you said about these amenities bringing parking issues. This is near where I live, and if you know, if we're gonna have a parking issue, I want the amenity, right? I think the traffic is there, and we've got a 7-Eleven that's not causing a parking issue. We've got very few other little amenities on this side of town. And so if there's a way that the community can have their voice heard about what they want, I think we owe it to them to do that. I don't, as many cafes and the post office that are in East Milton, I get that that's coincidental with the traffic issue, but I passed 2 other post offices on my way home that don't have parking issues. So I definitely see, I see what you're saying, that you don't want to make more of a burden. You know, on this side of town, we're bearing a lot of the burden of not having amenities too. So I think it's a balancing act, and we just need to hear folks out about what their needs are too.
Thank you, Regina. How about Tabor?
So I do agree with Dick's sentiment that we do need to deal with the parking, but I don't think that, you know, dealing with the parking means we can ignore whether they're amenities or whatever. I think I'm all about selling this idea. And, you know, Christine's been very patient, the whole library trustees and Will have been patient about dealing with this parking issue. And we do need to deliver something. And I think we've got to make sure that this, whatever sales pitch we come up with, is one that's actually going to work. And that means it has to address amenities, no amenities. It's got to address a deck on the existing parking lot. It's got to address, you know, virgin land next door. We're going to tear all the trees down and put up a parking lot. All of these things, how much can the churches give, et cetera. If we don't ask these questions, other people will, and this is going to die, and we will have wasted our time. So we've got to ask all the questions. I do think that the library has access to some fairly motivated customers, and that they all would like to participate, whether they know about it or not. And if each program starts off with, there's a survey at the back of the room, please fill it out, because if you don't vote for this, it's not going to happen. And all these people know that parking's very dear, and it's difficult to deal with your kids and strollers at parking at the town hall. That's a real motivating factor. So I think that's important to make sure that we get the votes from the library customers, and that we address all these questions, whether they make any sense at all to us or not, because somebody's going to bring it up.
Okay, thanks, Tabor. And Roxanne?
Thank you. I think we all have a few different viewpoints on it. I think we all realize that parking is what the library is coming to us with their need for. And I think that we have to be cognizant of that. I understand where people are coming from, and they're looking at all different uses in conjunction with that. I do think that when you're talking about taking a piece of land that, you know, we don't have a lot of land, right? So if we're talking about taking a piece of land, I think we also have an obligation to look at all of the areas surrounding the library, whether it's, you know, like I said, the parking across the street. Is there anybody that would, you know, sell some land to us near the library? I think we have an obligation to look at everything, because, you know, I remember one of the previous meetings that Chris was at, and somebody had mentioned, you know, either housing with this or a cafe. And I remember Chris saying something about, well, how will we figure out, like, you know, if somebody's parking there for the cafe, what about people that need it for the library? Or, you know, who's going to patrol those spots? And if you have 50 spots and you're saying maybe 20 are for a cafe and 30 for patrons or whatever, who's going to be the watchdog, you know, per se, to say who's parking and using those spots? So I do think that I hear what the library is saying about needing the parking. It sounds like they need parking for existing, but also parking for additional programming. I do think, as I've said before, for some of the additional programming, I know some places in the country are doing programming where they're bringing it elsewhere, you know, maybe the Milton Arts Center, you have an outside vendor that wants to do, I don't know, kids making goop or something, and they go to the art center on Tuesdays to do that, or then it's sponsored by the library. I think you have to be creative, and I think if you have to have a good reason to, and you do have a good reason for needing the parking, but there's a cost to it, whether we do anything additional with it, with that spot, or wherever we get parking, there's a cost to it. So I think we need to be creative, and that's my whole thing, is I think we can do a lot of different things to get to the solution. But I wouldn't want us to just focus in on this one lot and say, you know, we can't explore, you know, whether a neighbor would sell a piece of property to us or something. That might be 2 doors down or 3 doors down from this location, you know, whether it's on Reedsdale or whatever. I just think we have to really look at all, like, unturn all stones to
Roxanne,
achieve
you
this.
know, on the library side of the property, you've got the police, you've got the one single family, but then you have the police station, wetlands in Winter Valley.
I'm talking
On
the other
Reedsdale,
side.
you've got the hospital. Yeah, so it's
But
kind
on
of
the
a,
other side of the road, you already have a crosswalk there, for instance, right across from the library. I think the church is on that corner and there are houses. I mean, if we're talking, you know, 80,000 or something a spot, you know, in the long run, that might be a more reasonable proposal. I'm just saying you just have to look at everything. That's all I'm saying. And I think for Chris, I know that she's looking for the parking, so we want to try to get the parking. And I think we have to be looking at everything. I also think that this committee could also send a letter saying that we support parking for the library. This is one of the choices that we're looking at, which is that land that we're talking about, and pass that on for the select board, meaning maybe Nick Milano, planning board, to really explore.
I think
Because
one
we're
thing,
sunsetting in a year, you know?
yeah, one thing I would say is, in terms of the, if the library is going to look to buy a piece of property, they don't really need the MPIC to be involved in this. We were partly got involved because of the town resources of property, but also shared parking. I don't think that the library came to us initially and said that we want parking that's built just for the library. I mean, there's times when this parking might be useful for the concerts at the gazebo that would be right across the street. And, you know, there might be some overflow from some other events if the town center gets built out with the some of these uses that we're talking about. So no one polices the library parking lot now, no one polices town hall now, or the church parking lots right now, as far as I understand. So I don't think policing of the parking lots is really going to be, I think it has to be clear if there's another use that requires a certain amount of parking, how that use gets sort of segregated, so that I think what we were talking about before is if it were part of this parking were shared with another use, that we'd have to figure that out. But I think that is a topic. But I really want to make sure that we're not really saying that this is 100% dedicated to library parking only, because I think that's a mistake.
I agree. I think we need to think more holistically as like a mini community center, like amenity rich, you know, in some ways, maybe not rich, but you know, how do we look at this area? I mean, I feel like it's so, in some ways it's so well utilized, and in some ways it's underutilized. And you think about, I mean, Roxanne, I really like the creative thinking, and I think in a town with such limited resources, it's so necessary, and on so many things, I also think it's important, you know, twofold. One, if we're going to be asking the library to think creatively, maybe we can come up with some more specifics. Like, for example, we said, let's look at the church parking. They looked at the church parking. If there's something else that we feel like hasn't been explored, specifically state, like, you know, what those things are that we'd like to see before making a recommendation. But I think, you know, when Cheryl, I completely agree with your points, you know, just that this parking, I would hope that it wouldn't just be for the library, that it would be more for, you know, overflow parking for town hall as needed, just as the town hall would be overflow for the library as needed. And it's more of like a little center that people can go and they can, you know, pick up a form at town hall, pop over to the library, grab a book, and then sit and have a coffee and read it, you know. And I think that would be really nice, but maybe that's just me.
All right, I think we've covered everyone now, and we've kept Chris, probably missed her whole trustee meeting. Sorry about that, Chris. I never know how long these are going to take, so that's why I tried to, we've rescheduled now, not our June, so you won't have to worry about that, so.
Thank you.
All right, so we won't have a meeting before that forum, so I think we'll just circulate the slides right before, so everybody has a heads up. Regina will circulate some suggestions, and hopefully everyone will be happy with that. So thank you, Chris. We're going to move on now to other agenda items. Thank you so much. All right. We spoke about the next meeting dates, the approval of minutes. We have the May 1st set of minutes that I circulated just after that meeting. Does anyone need me to pull those up?
No.
No, okay. Then any corrections or amendments to the minutes? Nope, then I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Tabor, okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dick, okay. Roll call vote. Roxanne?
I'll abstain. I wasn't there, so I'll abstain from them.
Yes, thank you. Dick?
Yes.
Elaine?
Oh, sorry, same.
Abstain?
Hmm.
Sorry, yes. Regina?
Yes.
Tabor?
Yes.
And the chair, yes. Okay, so we have 402. The last time we met, I mentioned that the planning board was going to discuss their desired role in the economic development planning process with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. So planning board discussed that last week and decided it would like to be the touch point, if I think is the way Tim described it. I expressed our interest in having some planned or sort of clear role that we could participate, and that was accepted by the planning board. That work's not going to start until September, but they were earning out that contract, and the contract was pretty much final, so the scope is pretty much final. But there was interest in the planning board to address the pre-existing non-conforming places where there's pre-existing non-conforming business uses as part of that, and opportunity for new business use that are outside of the current business districts. So I'm not sure that was 100% spelled out in that proposal, but those were things that the planning board discussed. So any questions about that? No. All right. Then the draft 10-year report and the time frame. You know, a year is going to come upon us pretty quickly, as we all know. And so I'm going to just share screen one other thing quickly here. Can you all see that? Right, sort of table of contents. Okay. So mostly what I did was want to remind everyone that we're all going to be working on the report itself, as we agreed, and as we looked at in the organizations or the individuals that we invited in to speak to us about various aspects of the plan. Dick, I know that you've got circulation and transportation, but I wasn't sure if you had an interest in the economic development piece as well. That was something that Warren had worked on before. I planned.
Yeah, my piece with the circulation and transportation, interesting way of using the word circulation, but is that I don't think there's a conversation we have around economic development in this town that doesn't at some point start talking about traffic and parking. So these things are sort of interrelated. I think, Cheryl, you can take a lot of the other stuff, but I think that if we talk, just think about East Milton as an example of an existing central business district, for lack of a better term, is that, that's all you hear about. You can talk about all the different initiatives and interesting ideas and thoughts, and all of a sudden it just creeps on back to, what about traffic? What about parking? So I think that those things, I think unfortunately, they're interrelated, and going back to, I think what Regina said, in terms of, I guess it's just me, I look at Milton Village and I look at East Milton in terms of people parking and double parking using post offices, and I look at East Milton Square on a regular basis in terms of people parking at certainly Starbucks is an example of how these types of operations generate parking issues, and certainly traffic too. So I think that there's a middle ground on a lot of these initiatives, but I think we have to be thinking about them as to, if we build things or allow things to be built, they will come. So we can go
So
from there.
Dick, this terminology came right from the master plan. So in terms of circulation and
No,
transportation.
I know it's fine. I'm
Yeah.
just saying
Okay.
it's just an interesting.
Right.
Interesting.
So,
I've called it at least traffic and parking.
So I'm happy for you to take the lead on this, but since the planning board is going to be doing the lead on that topic with
You
that
should be
consultant.
taking the lead.
No, you're going to take the lead, and we'll work together. How's that?
All right, we'll
Because
figure it
I'll
out.
have information coming in from the planning board. So that's I'll cover the beginning stuff, right?
Okay.
And we should all take a look at that tracking spreadsheet just for any updates, because I think it's been about a year since we've gone through that. And I was thinking if we can kind of give ourselves a deadline for a first draft. I think it's good to have deadlines, right? We've kind of talked about this, and we've got an extension, but we also got a slightly revised charge to make recommendations. So my thought is the sooner we get the sort of the baseline of it done, we can talk a little bit further about the recommendations. So I'd like to have, some people are off in the summer, some people don't want to do anything in the summer. So if we set a fall date of having, so that if somebody wants to work now, somebody wants to work some in the summer, somebody in September, what do you think about having like an October date of having a first draft? Everybody has something together. Does that make sense?
Works for me.
I'm good with that.
Okay, and
Cheryl, excuse me,
Yes.
how long should each section be that each of us are writing? Like a paragraph, 2 paragraphs?
No, I mean, if we want to summarize 10 years of work, I think it needs to be more
page?
than a paragraph.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just trying to get
no.
a sense of how long you're looking at.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking a page. It could go 2 though, really.
Okay.
We do want the tracking spreadsheet, but if you think about it, there's over 120 recommendations, and we're trying to give a real update on that. I think, Elaine, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Well, are you finished responding to Roxanne?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking out loud, thinking it definitely should be at least a page, if not more. So go ahead, respond to that, Elaine, or to what Roxanne
No,
said.
it wasn't a response to her question. I was wondering what resources outside of the spreadsheet, like you do a report every year, or not you, but the committee does a report every year. Can we pull the last 10 years of reports? Do we have them?
Yeah. I think what actually might be, even the meeting minutes I think have been pretty good to pull up and review the meeting minutes. But yeah, let me look through the reports. And, the first few years we concentrated in Milton Village and worked on the wharf planning and then the zoning in Milton Village. There was a time when we took a look when all the 40Bs were coming. We wanted to help the planning department give a little bandwidth to look at housing. So were there any town-owned properties that some housing might be able to go towards, and looked at an inventory of housing that Allison Quinn had. So some of those things may or may not, how much that gets kind of addressed. So here's the thing, I'll share it. Some that weren't here for the 10 years, you can always ask the several of us who have been here for the 10 years, to fill in. So Elaine, on housing and neighborhoods, that's probably we haven't focused well, let me just say the Milton Village did have housing because it's mixed use overlay. So if we sort of think about big initiatives on the housing side. And then we did approve zoning that allowed for the housing at Walcott Woods and at Winter Valley. So if we want to kind of think about, how much progress we've made on addressing some of the housing recommendations, I can certainly help with sort of the big pieces of that.
Could we designate some time, if others agree, the next meeting to maybe go through each of these categories and have some of the more tenured folks in this committee kind of you just put forth like a few highlights just to make sure that we include?
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, would that be helpful? Like, that would be helpful for me. I don't know if.
I mean, I feel okay for open space and recreation and natural resources drafting and then sharing and getting feedback. But if you want something else, then
No,
need some more like pre-feedback.
Like
it's
if we
more
think
just
about,
resources, huh?
yeah, some of the things that have been, if you look at like think about some of the recommendations in the plan, like adopt the CPA,
Yeah,
right? So
right. Yeah.
that, fund affordable housing trusts,
Yeah.
so you can say that there's progress being made on those recommendations, right? The housing production plan was updated in 2020. It should be updated again in next year, but new zoning is underway now and was passed that allows
Yeah.
for mixed use in walkable or amenity rich areas, kind of those are the highlight things. And Elaine, if you want, you and I can offline just talk about those high level things on housing and neighborhoods if you like. And then you could, if you need more information to sort of round it out, we can do that.
Okay, let me take a stab at it and then
Okay.
I'll let you know if I need any additional resources. I just wanted to make sure it was thorough. It's many years of history, so.
Yeah, let me ask Tim too. I know Josh was putting everything in a OneDrive folder. So like if you wanted to go back and look at the reports and the meeting minutes, you didn't have to dig through them.
Oh,
So let me definitely follow up with Tim about that. And I need to see somewhere, did I make a note to resend the slides? Okay, resend slide deck. Ask Tim. All right. And then still, Elaine, if you still wanted to have a meeting to have, everyone discuss sort of where they are. I think once you get started, it might be a good time to have a discussion sort of every one of these topics because probably questions will come up as you get started, right? That's my feeling.
yeah, maybe we have like a standing item on the agenda that's just to check in if anyone has any questions.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to put now, though, we're all going to agree to a draft in October. This is a rough draft. I'll call it a rough draft. How's that? Okay. We don't have anything else on the agenda, except we had citizen speak, sorry, because we jumped around. I'm gonna stop my share. Is there anybody here? I see one phone caller. Would that person on the phone like to speak? I don't have my instructions here for how to do that either. I don't see that person would like to speak. So that's the
That might be
end.
Tim.
Oh, I
don't
suppose
know.
that could be Tim. We're letting him celebrate his birthday, right? I'm not calling Tim back here
Oh,
for
happy
this meeting.
birthday.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to
moved.
adjourn.
I'll
Okay,
second-
so Roxanne, who was my second?
I'll second it. Dick,
Dick, okay. All right, I've taken the minutes today and last time, and Tabor and Regina, thank you. And hopefully this is the last time any of us have to take the minutes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
thank you.